Thank you. All right, welcome everyone. I think there'll be some people that are still joining because you're starting super much on time. Yeah, I would love to, if it's available to you, you can turn on your camera. If not, no problem. And yeah, as usual, try to stay mindful of the mute button, although Henrik will support me. Yeah, so let me introduce to all of you who I am with today, of the organizers, organizers of the event. There is myself. I am Lucia. I'm the fundraiser lead at Ecolis, and I'm here with my colleagues, Juan, who is the manager of the Regenerative Communities Fund, which we'll be talking about today. And then there is Gisela, which is also an advisor for Ecolis and has helped us a lot with the funding strategy. And there is also Henrik, who is helping us with the Zoom and the technical side of things. And yeah, if you need anything, like if you have any Zoom related question, you can also write something in the chat. I will promptly respond. Yeah, so what brings us here today is the motivation to talk about participation in grant making, and we would like to have a open conversation with all of you, sharing experiences. This has been for us very important and relevant. It becomes more and more important topic, and it's something where we want to learn more. It's not something where we definitely are feel like are the experts yet, and that's also why we created this event today, because we invited some people with a lot of experience in the field of participatory regranting. But this has become more and more relevant in the framework of Ecolis's work, because we have recently launched the Regenerative Communities Fund, right? Which gives people the opportunity to, community-led initiatives, the opportunity to access more direct funding. Exactly. So before I say more about that, I actually would like to hear from you and know who's joining us today. So I have like a simple question for you, and would be great if you could put it in the chat so I could read them out loud. I would like to know from which city, or if not city, which regions you are joining from, and you can write that in the chat. I'm currently based in Freiburg, Germany. And I would also like to know from which kind of perspective you joined today. And I know that you can wear different hats, especially in this kind of environment. You might be both someone that is working on regranting, and maybe you received a grant yourself as community leader. But I would like to know if you see yourself falling in one of these three categories, which is funder or working for a foundation, an intermediary, which is more of an organization or community which fund itself redistributing grants to communities, or if you are a grantee, so that you see yourself more on that end. I can speak for myself. At Ecolis, I have been supporting with the Regenerative Communities Fund, so we're definitely an intermediary in this case, but I have also contributed to writing grants, both and receiving grants, both for Ecolis, but also on other projects I'm involved in my city, Freiburg. So just to give an example, and just so that we know that it's not so black and white always, but we find ourselves often being both grantees or intermediary or funders. So if you would like to, yeah, Inga, she gave it a start. She's joining from Paris, and she's a funder. So if you can follow the lead, it would be great to hear more from you in the chat. Let me just say a few more words about what we would like to achieve with this event. We are having now an introduction from Juan and about Ecolis and the Regenerative Communities Fund. He will go a little bit more in depth about that. And then we will have a panel discussion with some experts in the field and people with experience. And then we have a lot of time for you to ask questions and to go into breakouts and discuss the topic a little bit more in depth. So throughout this methodology, we would the final goal is to gather as much recommendations as possible, as much as input as possible, to then reshare with all of you who attended, but also for Ecolis to kind of absorb this information and work to further improve the Regenerative Communities Fund. Because ultimately, what we are trying to achieve is answering the question of how can this type of regranting mechanisms be serving as much as possible the network. So I'm looking forward to getting to this conversation. I think there are very important points about efficiency and, but at the same time, accountability and how not to be overly bureaucratic and yeah, a lot of other exciting questions. So I think that's it as an introduction. Juan, am I missing anything else? If not, I would just pass it on to you to say more about, to introduce more formally Ecolis and the Regenerative Communities Fund.
Thank you, Lucia. I think you did it great. I'm just looking at the chat for a second before we were speaking. I'm just trying to read a little bit, and we can see here the diversity of the people. We have intermediaries, several funders too, people from different places. I would like to invite you also to look at the chat together and look. We are 27 at the moment in the room. Okay, Talisa, you're in Barcelona. I'm here too. Good. So yeah, let's dive a little bit deeper into Ecolis and into the Regenerative Communities Fund, building upon what Lucia already started. Some of you already know Ecolis well, but probably for some of you also is quite new. So let me share what's Ecolis and what's its purpose. No, we all know that we live in a world that is affected by a systemic crisis on many levels: social, ecological, economic crisis, a world that is getting more and more polarized. And there are many different movements trying to work building alternatives at local level. 10 years ago, approximately, activists from different networks, in this case, mainly from the permaculture, eco-villages, and transition movement, we met together and we started to discuss about how can we have more impact and how can we bring the alternatives that were being built at local level at European level. No? How can we bring the voice of the local communities to really influence what was happening at higher levels, no? And also, how could we support more? How could we catalyze what was happening at local level? At that moment, it was a small network based on voluntary work, and at the moment, Ecolis, it has become an organization much more established, with more than 50 members in 23 countries, a lot of different partners, a team of about 20 people working in the organization. And an important part of the work we do, it's connected with policy work or with networking and capacity building work, with raising awareness and sharing stories of all these different transformative communities to try to foster new narratives of possibility. And when we work with communities, I've been working for more than 20 years supporting communities on climate adaptation, sustainability, and just transition. One of the things that is very clear, one of the main challenges that communities have is the lack of capacity. The lack of capacity at different levels, clearly also at financial level. You know, they need more resources, and we need to find ways in which we can channel that type of funding. In this case, for example, from different sources, European funding, but also private funding, etc. And how can we make them participate more actively in the decisions connected to that money? Many of you have a lot of experience in this, and that's why we are doing this session, and we have space to dive deeper into that. But for us, it was clear that an important part of the support Ecolis could bring to the communities was about trying to be an intermediary to channel that type of resources. No, a few years ago, we started to think about building a fund, and that's how it started to how we started with this seed, with this idea of the Regenerative Communities Fund. This is a long-term project that is getting initiated right now with European fund through a program called DEAR. Is a European 4 years project. But the idea of the Regenerative Communities Fund it goes beyond that. This is the way in which we are starting to piloting this initiative. I will share also the link of the first call that we're launching now. And we will be working, at least in this first phase, because we don't have more money than that, in 5 countries in Europe. In the first call, we are looking for 5 hubs, organizations that can support us to work at national level in 5 countries. And there we will work with different demonstrators, initiatives that can show and can inspire with their work, initiatives that are consolidated at local level, and they can share the way they work and the activities that they do. And then we will also fund 20 communities in each of the 5 countries. This is just the first phase of the Regenerative Communities Fund, and we are co-creating it, and we want to do that with the communities that we will be funding. So in a way that Ecolis, Ecolis has already 10 years history, but we're initiating our experience as regranters of course, in a humble way. You know, we are starting to learn from that, but we really believe that our role as a regranter is important and can support these movements, these transformative movements. And this is basically why we launched the Regenerative Communities Fund and why we're here, because we want to share this experience, we want to learn from you, and we want to basically to start this process. Let me just for you to have the information. I'm going to share with you to everyone the link of the call that we just launched, and then you can see also that as part of the Regenerative Communities Fund is in this piloting phase is part of a bigger project, a European project called Funding Fairer Futures that works on just transition and climate justice. And you will see that there are other funds led by other partners on youth, on gender, on working with the Global South, and so on. So we're co-creating all of this also with them, with partners such as Can Europe and others. But yeah, we want to learn from you and to co-create the next steps. We are trying to look also for funding to continue this project that we are initiating, the Regenerative Communities Fund. Yeah, and I don't want to take more time. Honestly, I don't want Gisela, Lucia. I don't know if Gisela, Lucia, or anyone wants to add anything on this, and if not, we just move forward to the panel. Good. Let me we have today four very special guests. Well, indeed, we have more because we also have Inga, but Inga will not be in the panel. And I'd like to present them. Just let me a second. So together we have with us Nisha Owen. I don't know if you can, well, everyone can see you, but you can say hi. Nisha is the Executive Director of Global Green Grants Fund. That is also an intermediary. And yes, well, she was also Director of the Conservation at On the Edge Conservation, a philanthropic foundation supporting conservation, science, and storytelling for edge species. She is also chair of the EUCN, and she has a very long experience in this topic. So it's a pleasure to have you here with us, Nisha. Thanks so much for joining. We will have also with us, or we'll have also with us, Sami from Collective Abundance. Sami, she is a social and climate justice facilitator with a background in environment policy, um, intercultural studies, and creative communications. And it's a pleasure to have you here with us also. Sami, thank you so much for joining. We have Gloria also. Gloria Mugabekasi. I don't know if I pronounce it well. Gloria is, she comes from the participatory grant making community. She's a development practitioner with over 8 years of experience in the intersection of social justice, participatory grant making, and gender justice. She supports indigenous funds, philanthropic foundations, and bilateral funders. So thank you so much, Gloria. And then we have Jason. Jason is also part of Ecolis from RIPES, that is one of Ecolis members. And well, Kim, sorry, I have many. I mean, I know him since a long time, but I just want to read some of the words. He's a passionate social environmental justice activist, long-standing commitment that began in the childhood with animal rights advocacy. He's the general delegate of RIPES. RIPES is the Social and Solidarity Economy Network, international network. He's also part of the Ecolisa board, Ecolisa Council, and he is also part of Fund Action. And I think it's very relevant also for this topic. So thank you so much for joining. We have four great panelists, and I'd like to start breaking the ice, making you a direct question to the four of you. So let's make a quick round just to share a little bit about what is participative or participation for you and for your organization. If we're talking about participative grant making, we're talking about participation that, by the way, Ecolis has a long experience in participative processes at social community level, but not at grant making or regranting level. So what is participative for you? I don't know, Gloria, maybe would you like to start, for example, and then you can, whoever wants to continue, you can continue.
Thank you, Juan. Hi, everybody. Really glad to be here and amongst colleagues and thought leaders and practitioners. My name is Gloria. I am with the participatory grant making community. I can see some of my colleagues here, Kelly, Catherine, and well, I would like to start by saying that the participatory grant making is a continuous journey. It's not a journey that ends somewhere. So I think that that's a disclaimer that I want to make. If you're coming into this space, just be ready to continuously learn and relearn and unlearn. The participatory grant making community, what we do and who we are a collective of global practitioners around participatory grant making. And essentially what we do is we share knowledge and practices to improve participatory grant making and also popularize its use within philanthropy. And we support each other through peer-to-peer learning, knowledge sharing, and advocacy. And again, we're a global community, so we span across the continent, Europe, America, Asia, Africa, and the UK. And for me and for us, what we see as participatory or participative, it's a need and a tool of shifting decision-making power from traditional funders to communities that are directly affected by the issues that are being addressed. So in a way, it's a way of democratizing philanthropy, ensuring that communities have real power within the decision making, and they have also authority. And this looks very different for different people in terms of like social, geopolitical, economic context. But what participative means, and I guess from like the word itself, it grounds us in ensuring that there is shared decision making, shared resources, shared knowledge, shared power between the two demographics. And if I'm going to go by like the traditional understanding of philanthropy, there's a funder and then there's a beneficiary or a receiver. And so what participative means is that the people that are receiving or benefiting from the resources that are being shared and distributed from traditional funders are part and very involved in making those decisions. And, you know, it's beyond, you know, just consultation and feedbacking, but it's also embedded in the principles of trust, equity, inclusivity, and shared leadership. And I think that this is true given the context in which we are currently working in and how we're seeing the globe shift. I think the call to say that participative is a way of holding us together and holding ourselves accountable to saying that the resources that we're sharing as funders are reaching the communities and are informed by the communities within those contexts, and because the communities do have solutions. But it also does manifest in different perspectives and models. To some, there is a closed call or a closed community or committee that sort of like sits and decides how decisions are made. The committee is given, for example, a budget of how much of the resource basket is there. And the committee that is situated within the context that they are working in then decides how the resources are moved or redistributed or shared amongst each other and within the people that they're working with. And to some, it could be a different model that embeds both the community and also the funders and sometimes the intermediaries, or sometimes there is an external facilitator to sort of like guide the process of participative. It really does vary for different people, and I'm just curious to hear what that looks like for everybody on this call. And I'm going to stop there for now and pass it to Sami.
Thanks, Gloria. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and share a bit about our project and learn from you all as well. So Collective Abundance is a movement building initiative. We say we engage philanthropic funding as a tool to help strengthen the climate justice ecosystem across Europe. And so what we do in practice is we, through our Abundance Fund, are funding on a country-to-country basis. We bring 10 groups together in each country for a collective process for a minimum of 3 years. And this process begins with an online introduction call, followed by a short in-person gathering, which is meant to help them start shaping what this collective process is going to look like. The design of that initial in-person meeting is co-created with these groups and pretty much everything else that follows. We definitely propose things and give structure where it's desired and needed. But we're not set on any one direction, especially because there's many different contexts we're engaging with, and therefore the groups have different goals. Our only ask as a funder, and I put only in quotations because it certainly requires intention and capacity from the groups that we're inviting into this fund. But our only ask is for them to come together, to get to know one another, and to work on building a collective consensus around what climate justice is, what it looks like in their country context, and what that means for what they could potentially do together. Although that's not the focus of our funding and our engagement. Beyond the initial grant that we offer each group, Collective Abundance ourselves positions ourselves as a resource for whatever emerges in their collective process, whatever emerges as something we can support them with. Especially when it's in regard to our mission, which again is to nurture stronger movements for climate justice by prioritizing relationships and collaboration. Currently, starting at the second year, we make additional pots of funds available, and the groups are invited to decide how to use those funds. So that's similar to how participatory grant making tends to work. Also, the initial decision of the 10 groups is participatory, and the fact that we do hire local organizers, bring them into our team, who are responsible for getting to know the grantees and talking about collective abundance. And then together with us, we reach a consensus on the 10 groups to invite into the fund. But yeah, we are extending the participatory aspect out to the collaboration, and not just the decision on money, and have definitely been in a learning process of what that looks like, what our role in that is. And it's been so fun so far. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Sami. Nisha, would you like to continue?
Sure. Thank you so much, Juan. And hi, everyone. It's really lovely to be here. So yes, I'm Nisha, and I am the Executive Director at Global Green Grants Fund UK. And here at Green Grants, we support environmental justice and climate justice grassroots movements in the global majority world. We're actually one of the world's leading environmental and human rights regranters in terms of the number of grants and grantees. And for 30 years, our mission has been to support communities to protect our shared planet and work towards a more equitable world. So over the past 30 years, we have made some kind of grants to almost 20,000 grantees worldwide. For us, participatory really means our advisory network. So we have a unique, decentralized, participatory and trust-based grant-making model where our advisory network of more than 250 volunteer activists across 27 regional and thematic advisory boards are actually the ones who decide who, where, and what to fund. So they identify and accompany grassroots groups who are working to change the systemic causes of climate change, environmental destruction, and social injustice. Because our advisors are really on the ground, they are identifying grantees from their networks. This is what forms the basis of our long-standing participatory model. And it means that we are actually the first source of funding for around 40% of our grantees. We are trusting local people to find the solutions that best fit their needs, and all we do is provide them with the resources to make it happen. However, I think as Gloria mentioned, we're constantly learning. So we are also working on diversifying our grant-making mechanisms, particularly around participatory grant-making. So exploring new mechanisms will really expand our impact by enhancing the direct participation of grassroots movements and communities, amplifying their voices within the philanthropic ecosystem in line with our field building strategy around shifting power, and also exploring new ideas and exchanging learnings. So what we really want to do is co-create a community of allied organizations that not only collaborate, but really share resources, knowledge, and expertise to support each other, to create common agendas, and to influence transformation of their immediate social and political spheres. As part of that, kind of organizationally, we are planning a participatory grant-making working group, which will draw members from our two governance boards for our UK and US entities, from our staff, and then from our network, so advisors, recommending organizations, sister funds, and grantees, so that we can really draw on their experiences and expertise to consider how we can develop new participatory grant-making mechanisms further, and how we can also iterate our existing mechanisms in line with kind of new learnings, new best practices as these emerge. We also have two initial initiatives that we've just started, which are really deepening our understanding and application of these participatory methods. So we have a new pilot Indigenous Peoples Advisory Board, and then we also have a collaboration with our partner Fondo de Acción Solidaria, FASOL in Mexico, and we're really excited to see how these two initiatives will progress and the kinds of learnings that we'll be able to share and the communities that we'll be able to support coming out of that.
Thank you so much, Nisha. And Jason, I think I pass it to you to share a little bit more about what's your understanding of participative. That, by the way, we are using both participation and participative, which to be honest, I don't know what's the difference. I'm not native speaker, but yes, that can even be a question. If someone knows the difference between both of them, that can be also interesting. Jason, over to you.
Well, thanks, Juan, Lucia, and everyone. Hi, Jason here, speaking from Florence, Tuscany, Italy, Europe, the world. Part of several initiatives. My background starts in some way with ethical and solidarity finance. I've been participating in several initiatives in my country and beyond on creating an ethical bank, on ethical or solidarity financing cooperatives, and let's say seeing how finance can serve economy and not vice versa. So how we can create financial mechanisms that are really empowering and supporting actions and practices and initiatives at the grassroots level. And this is a way to not only try to transform the economy, but also to find a sort of way out from the financiarization of the whole global economic system, which creates huge injustices and dependencies that we want to get out of. So I'm speaking from that point of view, let's say, on one side, and on the other, being part of a few initiatives that Juan mentioned, like Fund Action, which is, it started as an experiment out of discussions in Hedge Funders Alliance, which is another alliance of let's say progressive foundations in the US and other parts of the world, and as well as groups of activists that because of the radicality of their action and of the informality, found it very difficult to be supported either by public funds or by private philanthropic organizations. So I think what is interesting there, and there's the word participatory or participative, Juan, is how do you get the people who are using a redistribution of funds that are accumulated as part of the extractive economy. So, I mean, philanthropy in general is a result of the global economy in which we are and of extraction and accumulation. But it then, in these attempts, in these experiments, and in some of the progressive philanthropy, it attempts to be part of the solution by redistributing these funds to those that are trying to find systemic changes and solutions to our world crisis and problems. So the participation there is a sharing of responsibility of the way we design and redistribute and give priority to who is actually acting for this change. And I think maybe we use participation in a loose way. It's more collaboration, I think, because finally, the final decision is always in the hands of who has to disperse the funds. But let's say the method and the transparency and the accountability and the peer learning that there is in opening up philanthropy is something that I think can change this mechanism in a very interesting way. And in fund action, and I'll close on this, we're seeing that there's interest from small foundations, which are new generations of people who inherited lots of money and really want to do something positive with it, and they're finding in this possibility of being in touch more directly with who then uses those funds and shares the values and principles, something that can be finally useful. Yeah, I'll finish here.
Thank you so much, Jason. What a rich panel. Thank you so much, everyone, for those questions. I'd like to propose that we jump a little bit more into a few concrete examples. All of you have great experience, and I like that we jump in some inspiring examples and good practices. So, for example, Nisha, would you like to share from your long experience and the work you are doing, you and the organization you're part of, some inspiring examples and good practices on participative granting?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to share a more recent example, actually, rather than it's born out of our long history of participatory grant making, but really an initiative where we're exploring what it means to do that right from the outset. So for us, we have, as I mentioned, we've started a new initiative called our Indigenous Peoples Advisory Board, and we have really undertaken a very thoughtful piloting and establishment process. And this board is born out of the recognition that while Indigenous communities are the most impacted by the changes in climate, and while they may be active in climate justice work, targeted Indigenous people's leadership in grant-making decisions was missing. So in this board, we have 7 advisors from across the world who are actually co-designing a participatory approach to grant making and developing grant making strategies that reflect the shared understanding of Indigenous values, principles, and priorities. So together, the board is exploring a vision of organizational and philanthropic systems change that's really based on the respect, relationship, reciprocity, and redistribution by and for Indigenous peoples, recognizing the wealth of knowledge, culture, and resilience within these communities. So this pilot seeks to experiment with and learn from the increasing participation of Indigenous communities in the grant-making, decision-making process. And what this means in practice is that obviously participation will look different in various contexts, but the aim is really to increase participation of target communities, including the advisors themselves, and to learn from experiments in participation that they'll practice together. For us, the target communities are the most vulnerable and disenfranchised groups within Indigenous communities, groups that are active in the Indigenous people's climate movements, and village and tribal representatives. And the objectives of the board are threefold. Firstly, we want to learn how our grant making can really strengthen the participation of Indigenous activists, movements, their communities, and support peoples-led movements. So learning is central. Secondly, we want to experiment with how to reach more local communities in transformative ways that are informed by Indigenous philosophies and ways of life. And thirdly, we want to reflect and amplify the knowledge and active participation of Indigenous communities in the global climate justice movement in our grant-making approaches more broadly. So we, Indigenous peoples are a kind of a lead group across our grant-making, and around 70% of our grant-make goes towards Indigenous-led grantees. However, we are conscious that we are not necessarily always including decisions around their, who to grant to in a truly participatory way in our kind of more mainstream advisory board mechanism. Something that's really of interest in this board is also the concept of the thematic focus of healing and holistic well-being. So we're really trying to emphasize kind of collective care and what it means to participate in climate justice movements in a way that that really kind of meaningfully cares for those that are involved and are not just focused necessarily on the climate justice outcomes. And a few examples of things that we've already started to fund through this model are things like community growth and leadership development, skills building around rights and advocacy, the ability to kind of maintain, teach and offer traditional ceremonies and rituals, projects that focus on preserving stories and culture, projects that revive traditional ways of being, whether that's through food systems, song and dance and ceremonies, intergenerational knowledge exchange, protecting and preserving sacred sites. So there's a range of activities that are of interest to those particular communities. And in terms of kind of how the communities participate in these processes, we have a number of avenues in which they could do that. And so these range from participating in defining what the community needs are through consultation, participation after the application has been made in the decision-making process, ensuring that they're informed and or consulted before applications are made, and ensuring that we engage with them to explain the process to potential applicants or relevant communities that are interested. And then also having their participation in nominating, referring or advising on prospective applications. And the key thing here is that the advisors, the 7 advisors that make up the board, are also drawn from these communities around the world. I mean, obviously with 7, they're not representative of every community or every region or every theme, but collectively them and their networks have the ability to draw from a wide variety of communities and grantees that may be interested in this resourcing. So for us, I think that really kind of builds out our existing participatory process. And I'm happy to, shall I go ahead and answer that? I see the question from Inga. Is the group advisory as such? Yes, or in a specific area. So we have a number, like I mentioned, a number of advisory boards that through which we do our grant making, and they are regional or thematic. So it could be East Africa or the Next Generation Climate Advisory Board. So this is one of our global boards. So it's thematic, and so we can support grantees in any area that is related to Indigenous peoples. And so it is. But it's unlike our other boards, we have intentionally co-constructed and begun this co-creation of this participatory mechanism. So the advisors are really working with the communities and the networks they're from to involve them within the decision-making processes and to decide kind of on where the resources that we have to provide to grantees can be best directed. And I don't want to take up too much space. I can answer some of these questions in the chat, but just to say, who decides who gets the funding, where the funding goes? These are the advisors. They do this collectively, and sometimes they will include communities in deciding kind of the process. Like I said, in those different areas, they're able to participate. It won't necessarily be that all communities would be part of that decision-making process, but that they will participate in different ways. And the advisors will kind of collectively scrutinize and decide upon the grant making. We in the Global North, whether it's GGF UK or US, we do not participate in that decision making. We simply do our due diligence and the paperwork basically once the decisions are made so that we can transfer the money.
Thanks so much, Nisha. Yeah, well, the idea is that we will have also some space for questions for everyone. So I would like to invite you to keep those questions for the end, if possible. And yeah, let's continue. I don't know if Gloria or Sami, I see Sami's mic open. So Sami, if you want to share a little bit more, well, up to you, of the work you are doing.
Yeah, sure.
And some good practices and lessons from that work.
Yeah, I would say my first thought when it comes to like good ideas, good examples, is like, what is the purpose of setting up a participatory grant making mechanism? Like, what is our why, right? That was something we really needed to root ourselves in. Because, you know, for us, as I was explaining, our intention is to bring these groups together in a collective process, a collaborative process. And so the ask is to come together and know each other, see each other, see how they could potentially collaborate. The decisions on money are secondary, or in addition, I would say. And we can talk about all the different things that brings up. But I think it's an important distinction of kind of the autonomy we're hoping to nurture and increase amongst our grantee groups. So the grantee groups we work with are collectives themselves. So they're already working in their communities, doing things on a daily basis that they think are best for their communities. And we're just trying to resource them, you know, as Nisha was saying as well, we're just resourcing whatever emerges. And, you know, as Jason, you mentioned how philanthropy is a result of our economic system. So for us, that means that, especially as an intermediary, we're just trying to move funds and resources wherever they're needed. And, you know, we're very new. So like, we don't necessarily have all these structures or ideas of like what might be needed. We're just reacting and adapting to what is needed as they emerge. And that flexibility has been a really good thing for us. But that also leads to maybe some limits or challenges we've faced, which are related to the ability to receive unrestricted funding enables our ability to give that unrestricted funding out further. So yeah, I think we can talk more about that and the ability of that in our philanthropic worlds as an enabler to participatory processes.
Thank you, Sammy. Yeah, I think Gloria, maybe you can please go ahead and share not only about inspiring practices, but also about the challenges and lessons, because you work a lot with, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but with this approach of community of practice. I mean, you bring together a lot of different experiences, and I'm sure you have a lot of lessons to share. So please, Gloria.
Sure. Yeah, so as a community of practice, I guess like the advantage is that we learn from everybody and then we share all of that learning. We run our learning sessions through multiple medias. We have a YouTube channel where we have over 30 videos that are talking about various ways and practices within participatory grant making. So practices around conflict of interest, because that's very key when we're doing and setting up participatory grant making committees or practices or initiatives, because already the people that are redistributing the funds, they could also have potential interest. So like how to navigate that. We have a resource around how to do participatory grant making, monitoring and evaluation, because again, that's another process that is very participatory and very close to communities in terms of impact assessment and tracking. It talks a lot about like how different funders who are doing participatory grant making are doing that. We also do have a resource database. I'm going to be able to drop some of these in the links, or I know Catherine might share some of the links. So we have a resource database as well that has the resources from every part of the world. I would say about over 170 resources that have been tracked and added to our database. So I'm just saying that in case you are curious to see how different people are doing it in different parts of the world, what resources out there that you might want to interact with in terms of like when you're setting up a participatory grant making process, there is always that virtual and accessible information. And to the other end, where we want to make sure that some of our community members are handheld, for lack of a better word, but in terms of providing more in-depth training and coaching, we also do have participatory grant making learning cohorts. And in our Start Well cohort, we basically go through the processes of setting up a participatory grant making model, to how it can be tracked, to what are some of the best practices that need to accompany participatory grant making. And we also do have coaching sessions, again, within the Start Well cohort, which is to kind of like work with an expert or somebody that has practiced participatory grantmaking. It's such a word for a very long time, to sort of share their learning and lessons and handhold each other. And when I think of best practices, I think of a recent event that we held on participatory grantmaking during polycrisis, where we had funders and community members from Rawa Fund, which is a fund that is funding in Palestine. We had Mama Cash. We had Dalan Fund that is also based in Georgia, and Purposeful. And most of these have been long-term practitioners, or some are just emerging as participatory grantmakers. And we learned a lot. We learned a lot from them. We learned that some of the best practices that can work in crisis context, but also work within the context in which we all working, depending on where we are. And I wanted to add maybe around some of the best practices, in addition to what Sami and Nishan have said, which is very key. Again, it's compensation and paying for people's time. And I think that's also a participatory process that we can all reach to with the committee that is being set up. And there's also a great resource that is on our database around how to do compensation for participation. And I think the other key practice and practice that I wanted to highlight is ensuring that PGM is kept as a political tool. Because again, PGM, or participatory grantmaking, is to ensure that some of these hierarchical, traditional power imbalances are sort of like dismantled or somehow broken down. And so just keeping ourselves grounded within that depoliticization of philanthropy using participatory grantmaking. And that can be done again through just having these collaborations with folks that are working with the participative models, having resources, and being in community with the community members that are doing the work. Because I think we do learn a lot when we're learning from the people that are doing this work. And I think it's also very, very key in terms of how decisions are made. This is something that we continuously learn from our members, but also in my practice, it's very important to be able to share how decisions, for example, around the resource basket for a particular region, or a thematic area for a particular region or demographic, how that has been reached. It's very important to be transparent, but also, if possible and where possible, which is very encouraged, involve the community that is making the decision around redistribution of resources. And key to that is also tailoring PGM processes to specific context, because a different context are different. If it's a context within the East African region or India or Europe, it will definitely be different. So it's very key for whoever is starting a process or is curious about how participatory is run to have that contextual understanding. And again, it's informed by being in community and participating with the folks on the ground. One, you asked about the challenges, and I'll speak maybe about like 3 challenges as a member of a community of practice. I think it's sometimes it can be difficult to have board and donor buy-in of this practice, because from an outside perspective, or from a perspective of somebody who hasn't experimented with PGM, it can seem quite costly and time intensive, and it might need extra resources in terms of people and tools and systems to support it. And so sometimes there is a little bit of a pushback from different decision-making bodies, like the board or trustees or a senior management team. it can be quite difficult. And I think one of the key challenges that has been highlighted around this is concerns around accountability. For example, like how do we track that? How do we track that the communities we're working with, or a group of people, advisors or network, has the expertise to sort of like make these decisions of moving a big basket of money. And I think the biggest elephant is in the room is around risk, right? Like how do we, what do we do if this doesn't work and we have already put resources within a process? And I think that that is such a huge fear for people from, I guess, like an internalization of what has been working, which is traditional grant making, and some people and some groups are it's easier to go with what has been working than try out the new things. And I think also the other challenge that I want to highlight is around ensuring that participation is balanced along with efficiency. Something I mentioned earlier is that participation can be time intensive because you want to work with people that have taken their time to think through a process and to also consult with their different constituencies and networks in terms of the resources that they're going to redistribute and some of the key thematic areas that perhaps they need to focus on. So if it's a participatory grant-making model around, for example, climate change, there needs to be another participation and consultative process between the committee that is doing the participatory grant-making and the people that are going to be receiving the resources. And so that can take time because that again needs to come back to the team or funder to also sort of like balance between what they already have and the new information that comes up. So it can be quite time intensive, and I think it's such a big fear for traditional ways of doing things. But I think as with every new imaginative process, we just have to lean into the discomfort and trust people and trust the process. I know that's easier to say, but just being able to trust the process and the people are going to figure it out. I think it's quite important. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Gloria. Thanks so much. And I'd like to now to pass it to Jason. I mean, we've been talking about lessons, about inspired practices and challenges, no? From your experience in Fund Action, I'm also part of Fund Action, and I know there are a lot of challenges there. I'd like maybe if you want to share in more in the participation and the decision making and the process inside, if you can share more about the lessons, the learnings, you know, from the experience there. And I like that we transition because we will need to start wrapping up this panel before opening to the whole participants for more questions to you. That we transition also to what kind of accompaniment, what kind of further support do we think is necessary to support participatory grant making. So I'm going to pass it to you, Jason, for a last intervention in the panel, and then we may see if someone else wants to share something else before we open. Jason.
Yeah, thanks Juan, and thanks to everybody else. I mean, the issues, as you can see, are very many and very complex, and each one has really a lot to be dealt with. I was thinking of two examples because Fund Action is certainly an interesting experience, and I will say a few words about that and challenges and how evolving right now. It's a very interesting phase. But we're also, as I represent the network of practitioners as well, on solidarity, social solidarity economy in many different fields in many different countries with different political contexts and challenges. On that side, it's also interesting how we're trying to imagine as public funds become less and less available and are more restricted, how to become more independent from these, let's say, these more traditional forms of funding, and more resilient and mutualistic and cooperative in the way we share funds. So not just how we obtain them, but how we share them as well. But going back to fund action, it started as a something coming from the grant makers, a grant makers community, and now it's become something in the hands, if you want, of the grantees. So it really changed in nature in some way. The governance also has changed a lot inside. And in these almost 10 years, since 2016-17, there have been around 250 members participating, and about from 24 countries, 120 projects that have been approved with basically a mechanism that uses an online platform as its basis, but then has other peer mechanisms to go deeper in the different proposals themselves. And we're talking about very different kinds of practices and initiatives in feminine initiatives, civil rights, alternative media, a lot of anti-teen initiatives working on migrant communities, LGBTQ, climate justice, all the way to public health, etc. So there's really a wide range, and each one of these are really different in the way they work, in the way they themselves organize community. So the challenges, I think, has been, on one side, are we building a community of individual activists as this had started, or are we building something that is bringing their communities, their networks inside, and how do we involve those? So not just the individual who participates, but actually have their community informed and being part of the processes. How do we avoid, it was mentioned before, the conflict of interest, and to become a club that has a pool of money and then decides how to, in some way, share it, and instead build a real community that has clear rules and accountability on how that is shared. This is still an issue within, because you have more active, more knowledgeable people who are more into the processes and have a better understanding, and others who have to be in some way accompanied. So that brought out an issue about, and this has been really a focus in the last year, about how do we create a caring community that is really inclusive and brings in those who have had historically and for many different reasons less capacity to be able to even access a participatory process like what this wants to be. And that's also about sharing the risk and building the trust, as was said before. So doing it at a distance is very difficult. And I think this is one of the bigger challenges when we have a international kind of mechanism. We work in one language. We work with certain kind of work methods and organization, and that's not something that is easy and immediately inclusive for many. There's also an issue of structural funding. Most of the funds are designed for actions, activities, projects, etc. What is missing and is really the hard part to get access to, is long-term structural funding for the communities, the organizations, the initiatives to develop and to be able to consolidate, to strengthen what they have, to pay fair and just salaries to their workers, and not continue and perpetuate a form of unjust retribution. So all of this has to be designed inside the way the grants are made, and not just also the decision-making process then of how they are assigned or distributed. So I find that this experience of fund action, which is also a learning process, is really addressing these issues, and is trying to find a good compromise between the needs and desires, let's say, of the activist community, and how we can organize and establish a positive dialogue with who has the resources and is willing to open to these experiments, if you want, still in an experimental stage, with the risk that has. So yeah, I think there's also another issue which is getting more and more difficult today in country, not just in the countries who are traditionally in a autocratic or non-democratic states, but also in more traditionally social democratic states. The freedom of association and especially on very sensitive thematics, becoming more and more difficult, and is made more difficult by controlling authorities. So how do we deal with this in a political way that enables and empowers these communities to, again, not be dependent totally by
Jason,
state funding or public funding?
I'd like to ask if you can wrap up.
And I close.
Yes.
I close with it.
Ah, okay. Wow.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Sorry, but
Good.
when we're discussing these things.
The thing is that we are touching very, very relevant topics that are very interesting for us, and the time is what it is. So,
Yeah. So
yeah.
just to close on this. Just to close on this, even in Europe, where we consider that we have democratic rights, etc., this is becoming more difficult. So when we are thinking of participatory grant making, this becomes really a crucial tool to also counteract the situation that we're in.
Thanks so much, Jason. I'm aware that each of you could use a lot of time. I would have liked also to listen a little bit more to all of you, to Sami, for example, and everyone. But I like we talk about participation here too. So let's open the arena for everyone to make questions. There were a lot of questions in the chat too. So so yeah, let's go to those questions, or whoever wants to open the mic, you can make direct questions to our great panelists. Just feel free to put your hand up, and yeah, I thank you. And can you please share your name also, Stefania, and where are you calling from?
Yeah, well, hello everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Stefania. I come from Colombia, but I live in France since 4 years ago. I represent an organization that is called Glacier Nation in the English version, but we call Cumbres Blancas in Colombia, where we originally born. We are a grassroots organization that has been working 6 years for high mountain ecosystems, especially communities and restoration projects. And we have been doing it, as any grassroots organization, really from our own pockets or certain help locally in Latin America. But now this is the International Year of Preservation of Glaciers. It's a year really important for us because I think it's all the attention on that ecosystems that sometimes we forget. And we are being expanding into US and Europe. So we are creating the different grassroots organization. I think one of the biggest topic that bring me here, I don't know how I found this call. I just applying all the time to grants, and I saw Ecolis and I start to read and I get super interested because I think one of the things that we battle the most, and continue with what Jason say, is to build that bridges, right? For example, right now we know the political situation in America, right? Colombia depends on 70% around of the cooperation international of United States. And we know what is happening with that. So yeah, not only organizations like us, but also the country is facing a really hard moment for grant making, right? So I spend all my days like looking for grants. We just win a grant, especially from a regranting process that is called Daughters for Earth. That is an organization, philanthropist in United States. And yeah, it's the first grant that we win. So I mean, it's part of the learning process, and I love to hear that there is a community that we can learn from, because I think big part of the problem is that you don't know where to reach these people that have this key knowledge. So I'm really grateful to be here and to listen to you. And I think the most important for us now that we are expanding and constituent is exactly that structural funding, Jason, that you were saying, because mainly the projects that we apply are for the restoration projects, right, that we have to support our communities, to be able to give certain salaries to our people. Only until last year in Colombia, after 6 years, we become a little bit more sustainable with the different partners that we made, but it's especially private sector that is being helping out. So yeah, I want to continue learning from you. I want to continue know how Latin America can be impacted, especially the Andean region, with Ecolis and all the process, and how even if we are building it here in Europe, it's not only to make community in Europe, but also to sustain other communities that depend on us. So
thank you, Stefania. I see you didn't have a question, but that's great. Thank you for your contribution. Who would like to continue? Lucia, I think you have your hand up.
Thanks, Juan. So there were a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah, help me with the chat.
Yeah, I also really want to, that was a very interesting conversation, very, very real. So there was the first one. I mean, I see that Gloria already responded, but maybe it would be good still to read it out loud. Gloria asked Dennis asked to Gloria, what actions are being taken by the participatory grant-making communities or members of the community to keep participatory grant-making political, and what is being done to influence traditional funders on this way of funding? Well, I would read out loud the answer to Gloria so we can go to the next question. Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to invite everyone to understand that the time is limited, so let's try to be concise.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so, then since the answer is in the chat, I will leave that there. And then there is another question for all. So Juan, up to you to pick the first to answer, but from Dennis also. Has anyone done any primary research, evaluation, or literature review on the value add of doing grant making participatory? This could be intrinsic value or more the instrumental value of effectiveness. Very interesting question.
Interesting. Does someone know about that? Someone?
I could also use a few seconds to explain why I'm asking this question, because I get this question from inside Portuguese where I work. I'm a colleague of Inga's, and Inga know that I'm one of yours, so don't get me wrong when I ask this question. It's more than anything, I'm trying to work with Inga and some other colleagues to try and see how Portuguese as an organization itself could become more participatory in its own practices, including the way that it funds. It also means that the more that we know and the more that we can demonstrate to those who might be still a bit skeptical that participation makes a difference, the better it is and easier it is for us to make the case. So we have been doing some initial research, meaning we commissioned some research done by two very able consultants who did that for us. Some of you may know them. And you can, I will put in the link to the document that came out of this initiative. But we also realize, and the consultants have also been very clear, we are just scraping the surface. Hopefully, they only scrape the surface, and there is more such evidence available. And if there is not an awful lot of evidence, which could also be the case, and I'm fearing that that might be the case, then we may need to produce more. We need to generate more. Just to be absolutely clear, a colleague of mine at some point in an internal meeting made it very clear to the entire organization. Why is a group like this always asked to demonstrate that participation is more effective? Why is no one ever being asked the question, can you do it the other way around? Why do we have to prove that participation is more effective? Why don't you prove that non-participatory activities and approaches are more effective than participatory approaches? Fair enough, right? So you can ask that question. It becomes like a political question. It does mean that in either case, looking at it from the one end or the other end, it would be cool and helpful if we had more evidence that shows and compares one with the other. And that, I think, is very rare still. So that's why I'm asking the question, does anyone know of this type of evidence? If not, is anyone interested or knows of others who are interested and help generate more of those kind of evidence, so that all of us in this call and beyond, the PGM community being, I think, a fantastic, fabulous platform for this, so that we all have more of such evidence to convince those more traditional funders to step into it. That's the background. A bit long, but that's the background to my question. But it also tells you a little bit what we are trying to do and the importance of the thinking behind that question.
Thank you, Dennis. Very relevant. I think all of us, we are allies and we are here because we want to foster this type of transformation. And Sami, I think you were putting your mic on. Please go ahead. You want to share something?
Yeah, I mean, I maybe we'll get more into this in the breakout rooms as well, but I guess in relation to that, I have not done any of these literature reviews or evaluations of it myself. All I can say is lived experience. And we know that like traditional grant making and the way that philanthropy is traditionally functioning is in silos, and it asks people to create grant applications for a particular thing, right? That's why we're talking about core funding, the need for core funding outside of like project-based grant making. And I think what's just really sitting with me is, you know, if we want to do participatory grant making, the question I think we should ask ourselves is our intention to resource, or is our intention to devolve the decision-making around resourcing to others? And if it is to resource, then the participatory aspect of grant making is also involved in the relationship between the grant maker and the grantee themselves, you know, like the addition of a participatory grant making process that brings individuals from a community together to decide on funding for others in their communities is also super valuable. And, you know, we can also involve participatory mechanisms in all the ways that we fund, whether it's a typical setup or not. I hope that makes sense, what I'm saying. But I really think that we should think about whether we, you know, talking about the politicalness of PGM, it's certainly important to devolve decision-making power, but as Jason mentioned before, ultimately the decision lies with the grant maker, the person that holds the funds. So are we trying to resource or devolve decision-making is something that's really sitting on my mind.
Thank you so much, Sami. I see Lucia's hand. I propose that we wrap up this part and we move to the breakouts, because we will have more conversations about this there. But Lucia, over to you.
There is then the two questions, I will read them immediately, and then maybe two people can answer. But one is Tracy, that is quite surprised that she never heard of the participatory grant-making community and was wondering, I guess, question for Gloria. Gloria, who usually gets in touch with you, if it's more the communities, or it's more like the NGOs representing these communities, or who are your target audience? And then Matilde, could you go a bit in depth into the process of building a community, facilitation, duration of the mandate, etc.? I'm also interested in good practices for shifting resources and implication of funders into the process to have a collective learning. Okay, it's a quite general question, but maybe if someone wants to say just a few words about the actual process, the building process of participatory grant-making.
I can speak to who gets in touch with the community. So our community is open to everybody. It's interesting. We have traditional funders, we have intermediaries, we have international NGOs that are also working within the ecosystem of reimagining development sector. We have also individual consultants as well. So it's really such a wide community. We have a listserv where we share the resources. That is a Google group. We also have a mailing list where we share our newsletter that always has the PGM resources and news and trends that are happening within the ecosystem. But I think something that Dennis shared that has also been sitting with us for some time is how do we actually hold the sector to account around participatory grant-making? And I think right now we have seen that a lot of people, ever since the COVID pandemic, a lot of foundations and funds and organizations are trying to move into that area. And it could be one, that's what everybody's doing or trying to do, but also perhaps the appreciation around power sharing and how that increases impact and how it creates the community, the shared understanding of values of why we're doing the work we're doing. But I also think to the other side that there are processes that are not entirely participatory, and because there isn't a tool where people are marking themselves on like how participatory are they, it can be lost. And so what we're trying to do and build as the community of practice is to build a group of people with tools that are able to say, this is how we can hold each other accountable. So perhaps through various toolkits, various systems and tools of tracking how truly participatory a funder is, because I think it's important to, like what Sami was saying, like beyond just participatory grant-making of moving resources, it's initially around like shared decision-making and dismantling some hierarchical powers that exist. So that has really stuck with me. But yes, we're working around a community of groups that can help us to do that work of accountability beyond the resource sharing that we're doing and the events that we're holding that have such profound conversations and meaningful, you know, reality checks around who is truly participatory and how do we get into this space.
Thank you, Gloria. Thanks so much. Yeah, and I see also a comment from Nietzsche. I don't know, Lucia. Well, I can read it too, but I think it's relevant, connected to all this conversation. Yeah, I guess everyone is reading it. So, yeah.
Sorry, I would have said it, but I thought we were moving on, and I just
Yeah,
wanted to make the point.
in principle we are moving on, but yeah, you can raise Nisha, and then after that we move.
Sure. So just to say the real value of an intermediary is in taking risks. And so there's an opportunity there for intermediaries to resource this experimentation by communities around participatory processes, but also to take on that risk on behalf of big donors whose institutional processes and bureaucracies and due diligence requirements may not allow them to do that. So this is something that we do at GGF, and we'd like to see more intermediaries really place value and priority on that. And just also to say very quickly on power, because I was going to add that too, this again is another important part of the role of intermediaries, because participatory processes are shifting power away from centralized decision making. And we have to ensure that that shift is genuine and that those participatory processes and participants are genuinely valued and listened to. And again, this is something that intermediaries can really specialize in, because they have those connections and they have that understanding. And this may be very challenging for traditional mainstream funders that have a very certain way of doing things to try to move into these processes without causing harm. So this is another way where there is value in intermediaries, particularly when larger funders who are looking to dip their toe into the water, you know, it requires a massive cultural shift. And so this is where regranting can sometimes be more effective in these spaces.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and I think now it's time to go to breakouts. I think it's been incredibly rich. Should I pass it to you? I think we'll have about 15 minutes. So let's go to it.
Yeah, Sammy was speaking. Actually, maybe the point was actually to do a little bit of now to hear just in a few words, because like really like maybe 1 minute each, one highlight from each breakout, because I want to hear from Inga and Gisela, and then we have to say goodbye. So maybe Sammy, would you like to maybe give an insight of what we discussed in our breakout? I think we had some really interesting conversation. Just one highlight.
Sure. Well, I started by harping again about knowing our why and setting up your PGM process with that intention in mind. And then I ended by saying we all need to know our roles. So very connected, I would say. I think as an intermediary funder, we're really understanding our role and shaping it as we listen to our grantee partners and advocating and agitating to our foundational funders on how they can support this more. And so we all have our roles to play. We talked about not making grantees grant makers and therefore taking on the burden that we do and offering space for the movement leaders to contribute and like give their opinions and shape the process as much as possible. There's a bit of scaffolding and structure needed when you set up a PGM process, but the flexibility to change that depending on what your feedback is extremely important. There's no one right way to do it. It's really about who you're trying to address and who you're trying to resource and why. Yeah.
Very well, thanks. I appreciate it. We're very recommendations oriented. This is helpful. We can share this with our community-led initiatives network. Maybe from breakout room 1, where Gisela was, someone who would like to report in 60 seconds.
Was it you, Talisa?
Yeah, sure. I can give the report back. Didn't want to take too much space since Sammy and I are in the same collective. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up the notes we took, but I think one of the core things that we spoke about was accessibility of all of this. We had someone in our breakout room who shared not being familiar with a lot of these things, and sometimes we get in our echo chambers of talking about participation and models and funding and philanthropy as if everyone knows what these things are, what they mean, how they work. So I think a big recommendation is just to be more accessible and clear in our vocabulary, our language, the way we talk about things, understanding where communities are at, like the communities that we want to work with, where are they at, and how can we make sure that our language reaches them and not them having to come around and find us. We talked about flexibility, not just in processes, so deadlines, application timelines, things like that, but also flexibility in our thinking of like what haven't we seen but may be possible, like what may be possible that we just haven't tried yet. So expanding our thinking, moving at the speed of trust, not being afraid to fail, thinking of PGM. I think, Gloria, you mentioned it as a continuous learning journey, and we had also last questions around participation, not just from the grantees and the communities, but also from the funders, right? So like not just that resources move from funders to grantees or to communities, but there's also a lot that moves back towards funders, and what does that participation look like and mean? And it was a question we were left with.
Thank you, Talitha. Thank you so much. I have the rest of your contributions to the breakouts in the document. So if anyone has like a burning comment, please write it in the chat. I might be able to have time to read it out loud. But we only have a few minutes left, and I'm aware of your time. So I would like to actually now hear from Giselle and Inga, who have been our listeners. And yeah, hearing just a few conclusive or closing words about yeah, what came up for you, what did you capture, what did you absorb the most from this conversation? Any reflection is welcome. Inga, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to try to summarize, but what I thought was just leave you with some of the things I heard and just bring them back to the room so that everybody can, yeah, make of this what she wants and needs. So some things I heard. It's a continuous learning and a journey. It's about shifting of power. Root ourselves in the why. Flexibility, transparency, vulnerability, adaptability. Lean in discomfort and trust. Community does not mean inclusive. Participation is a two-way road. Keep it political. I leave it here.
Thank you, Inga. I think you said all the important things that were mentioned. You have said. I think what stood out for me was really this idea of participation as being like the boost word, no? Because now in the political situation we find ourselves, everybody, including all sides, are talking about participation, about inclusivity. But in reality, what does it mean, and how far does it go? And I think the fact that we are here at this time, and there are an upcoming number of organizations like Ecolise trying to play this role of intermediary, is a reflection of the need to find other ways to reach out. But we are still learning, as most of you have said, and how important it is to find evidence. Yes, but at the same time, the participation is also, we have mentioned, it's also about advocacy. It's a political thing. It's about redistribution. It's about how do we shift power. We are not really shifting power. In reality, we're talking about, for now, what is really a small amount of funds that actually gets redistributed in this way to a very small selected few organizations. So how can we really matter more? And I think maybe there should be a more radical shift of thinking that also implies the idea that, well, it's not only kind of a participant, it's actually what we need. Because if you do not involve people on the ground, you're not participating in changing their future and changing the social contract we have. I think situations is going to get worse and worse, and we're going towards an autocracy in most of the countries that until yesterday were not. So either we invest in here massively, but also in the political movement that needs to take ground. So yeah, participative, two-way, it's essential. And yeah, and I think the fact that we are all here and that we all remained here throughout these 2 hours, we hope to come back to you with, you know, with something you can do something with the report. I also mindful of what was said. We need evidence. Yeah, evidence. Well, the evidence is what we don't do if we don't get there. There's a Italian singer that song that has had this song, "Participation is Liberty." Well, that is actually that is what is at stake. So I leave you with that.
Thank you, Gisela. Thank you so much. And thank you, Inga. I also think you brought up we're really good at through keywords highlighting what are some of the things I take away. And also, it was a long time that I wasn't joining a online conversation, and I want to thank you because I found it very engaging. I really appreciated the input of this of the panelists, and thank you, Juan, for leading us through the conversation. I also, maybe if Juan, you can post in the chat like the link to the Regenerative Communities Fund. So just a small reminder that the call is open until March. And yeah, Ecolis is working on expanding the connections with intermediaries, grantors, funders, both private at the European Union level, to reach out to more community-led initiatives and support more community-led initiatives. So please, let's stay in touch about that. I want to thank again also Henrique for supporting with the Zoom, the breakout, and all the technical stuff in the background, and for letting this event run smoothly. We will post the recording, the slides, we'll make the notes look prettier and share that too as well. Thank you, Gloria. Thank you, Semi. Nisha, you're still here. Great. And Jason, you're also still here. Thank you for staying until the end. I very much appreciated your input, and you're taking so much of your time. And thank you to all of you for participating and being so active and contributing actively in the breakout rooms. It was really nice to see. Juan, do you want to say a few closing?
I wanted to say one thing, which is thank you to you too. Yeah. and then yeah, I've just said the links of the Regenerative Communities Fund, and yeah, as some of you shared, this is a journey, and a key aspect of it is trust and collaboration. So let's use also this opportunity to continue. I mean, we have connected. Some of us we were already working together, but let's make this as one step of this journey together. And I think the Regenerative Communities Fund is on its first phase. We are now looking for 5 hubs in 5 countries. Then we will work with more than 20 communities in each of the countries. And we want to create that participative system among all these communities. So let's do it together. Welcome.
Bye-bye, everyone. Ciao.
Bye. Thank you.
Goodbye. You can
Thanks, everyone.
turn on your mic if you want to say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you very much.
Ciao. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, Tracy.
See you. Didn't know if you wanted to keep us on for a moment.
Can you stop the recording, Enrique? I can do it too, but